Welcome to Freedom Lovin'. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 12. And today I have an interview I did actually with Andrew Henderson at the Nomad Capitalist Report. And he interviewed me, it was, about, I'd say a month ago, and I'm just getting around to posting it now. But we had an interesting conversation. We talked about offshore businesses, living abroad, dating and traveling, and a little bit on Vietnam. And so he can be found at at nomadcapitalist.com. And yeah, so that was fun, and I'll have that in just a minute. Just had a few things to mention first. I did have some iTunes reviews. A couple iTunes reviews came in. Super stoked about that. And the first one is from Business Mastery, which is Jeremy, who I've had on the show a couple times. He says, practical freedom advice. 5 stars. And he says, if freedom is your goal, this is the show to listen to. No endless theories showing how enslaved you are. Instead, practical tips to generate more freedom. Thanks, Jeremy. And the next one is from jski94. And it's also 5 stars. Great podcast. This podcast provides practical ideas for increasing your personal freedom. The interviews are interesting and thought-provoking. If you're a fan of Harry Brown's How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, then you'll love this podcast. Keep up the great work. Thanks so much for that, Jay Ski. And I would recommend checking out that book if you haven't already. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes today. There aren't many copies out there. You can actually search the web and probably find a free copy as a PDF file. So that may be a way to go if you want to just kind of read it, or just go to ultimatefreedomquest.com/tools, and there are summaries of each chapter there of the book. So that's a pretty cool resource. Anyway, if you would like to help out with the show, please give me a rating and review on iTunes. It would be much appreciated, and I will read your review on the next episode of Freedom Lovin'. And I'll have the link there in the show notes, but you can just go to the iTunes store and go to the Freedom Lovin' podcast and post away. One other announcement I have is I'm offering on freedomlovin.com a chance to get 7 practical tips to living free in an unfree world mini course. So if you just go to freedomlovin.com and you can put in your name and email, you'll start getting those emails with practical tips. And I'm talking about stuff like financial freedom and personal freedom, and really stuff that really you can start putting into use right away. So go ahead and check that out and let me know what you think. There's 7 total emails that you'll get, and they're covering a wide range of topics. But you should, at the end of that course, you should be able to feel a little bit more free, and that's what kind of my goal is. And if there's anything else that you think should be in there, just let me know by responding to the emails. So again, just go to freedomlovin.com to access that. Otherwise, this weekend I'm off to see my favorite band, Rush. It's one of those bands that people either love or hate, and I've been listening to them since I was like 12 years old. I think I started really getting into them, and ever since then, they've been around since 1973, I think. So it's been about 40 years, and they really put out albums about every couple of years. It's amazing. And these guys are like 60 now, and they're still touring and hitting most of the major cities. And so I'll be seeing them in Denver. Still haven't got my ticket yet, but Craigslist has a few options. There's that, and then I'm moving this weekend, which is kind of fun because I can throw out a whole bunch of stuff again. So I'm just basically packing my car and going across town. And I do need to find a mattress because this place has everything furnished except for a mattress. So I will have to do that. But otherwise, I think it should be pretty easy. Just need to clean and get out of my apartment and move into a new one. I'm kind of looking forward to it because the place that I'm in now is it's really dark, which is not something I like. I really like a lot of sunlight. The advantage of that is in the summer here, it gets up in the upper 80s, sometimes into the 90s, and it can get pretty hot inside, but my place has been cool all summer, no air conditioning needed. So that's been pretty nice, but definitely need to get back to the sunlight. Oh, one more thing. Yesterday, I got a chance to chat with Jeff Berwick. So I interviewed him for the Freedom Lovin' podcast. And he's the dollarvigilante.com guy, and it was really interesting because he talks a lot about moving out of the U.S. and why it can be important to do that. And so it kind of gives a different perspective of some of the things I've talked about. But But obviously, it's something to think about when we have this economy that's on the ropes and probably not going to last too much longer. So he talks about a lot about moving to Chile or moving to Mexico, or even just the idea of travel and getting out of your comfort zone, getting out and seeing different things, meeting different people, and kind of seeing the world. So that will be out next week, hopefully early next week, and I highly recommend listening to that. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy this one, and have a great week, and go out there and build some freedom.
I'm Andrew Anderson, NomadCapitalist.com. This is the Nomad Capitalist Report. It's never been more important to have an income that you can take with you anywhere in the world to make sure that not only yourself, not only your assets have an escape hatch, but that you can use that escape hatch and profit and survive anywhere in the world. We're talking about global entrepreneurship, opportunities overseas, plus the necessity of building something you can take with you. Kevin from freedomloving.com is my guest. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here.
We are here reporting from Ho Chi Minh City, where you have been. And what I think is very interesting, our friend Ulysses De La Torre over at Diverging Markets talks about the very porous capital controls here in Vietnam. But you have some experiences here on your own where the Vietnamese government, allegedly communist, really not that effective at it. And I would make the argument freedom somewhat about how effective the government is in their Gestapo tactics. Talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. And like we were just saying, one of the things that the government did there, and again, they are technically a communist government, is that they banned Facebook throughout the country. And so I guess they thought that that would eliminate people from getting information about freedom and things like that. And but you go around Saigon, and there's a lot of cafes and coffee shops, and you'll see that most of them are crowded and with people with laptops, and you'll see a lot of people on Facebook. So people just skirt around whatever the government's trying to do, and they jump on their VPNs and they figure it out. And that was one of the things I liked about Vietnam, is that they know that everything's a mess in the government. It's completely corrupt. There's no question. No one argues that. So it's all about trying to work around the system.
Where you live in California, though, you can make the argument, hey, that's a pretty corrupt government, too, and pretty inept, except when it comes to tracking you down for 2 cents. If you owe the Franchise Tax Board in California a dime, they will follow you to the ends of the earth. They'll send the bounty hunters out after you. But if you need anything, heaven forbid they would run an efficient government. It's nice to see that at least we can get things on one track one time. The government is inefficient when it comes to taking away your freedoms as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And just as far as California goes, the Franchise Tax Board in California is probably worse than the mafia as far as how they pursue people and things like that.
I was going to say waterboarding, but all right.
Yeah, I could see that happening. But I don't actually live in California. I do spend a lot of time there, but I'm actually I'm currently in Colorado. So I'm a permanent traveler or a perpetual tourist or whatever you want to call it. And so my home is wherever I am standing.
One thing that you talk about at freedomlovin.com is something that I just love, because I've done this myself, but we don't always talk about this, the idea of travel hacking. So many people say, hey, Andrew, I want to get out there. I want to go to Singapore. I want to open a bank account. I want to start a business. First, you have to go. You have to get there. And as kind of an airline geek on the side, I follow this, and I get treated pretty well. But for the person who's just flying that one time to Vietnam or to Hong Kong or wherever it may be, give them some of your travel hacking tips for them to be able to get out there on the cheap.
Yeah, it definitely starts with you have to do the credit card points. Sign up with an airline or one of the credit cards that gives you points for spending money. And that's really the only way to go, because otherwise the flights over to Asia are just prohibitively expensive for most people. So, I've got several credit cards that I use, and you get bonus points on a lot of them. So, for example, I have one that I just got a few months ago, and one of the things that they offer is 50,000 points for spending $5,000 in 3 months. So I used that as my business card, and I met that requirement. So that's definitely, and there's so much information out there about credit, what the best credit cards are. I'm not a total expert on that, but there's definitely some good ones there to take advantage of. And there's some hacks within that. You can get more miles for just doing little things. So that's one thing. And then, there's another system that I learned actually from the site, it's chrisgillibo.com. He does the art of nonconformity. But I learned this other hack where you can actually buy these vanilla reload cards, and you can actually pay your bills using those cards. And then so what's happening is you're accumulating all these points by just paying your bills and paying your mortgage and your rent and things like that.
Yeah, and obviously lots of sites like flyertalk.com and other sites give so many of these tips, and obviously another tip, certainly you're exactly right. Spending not a lot of money. I think the Amex Platinum card is giving away 100,000 miles worth $1,200 in plane tickets, and obviously then you can use that money to go out and accumulate more miles because you're actually spending money with the airline versus using miles where you don't earn miles, obviously, when you use them to fly, but you do earn miles when you buy a $1,200 plane ticket from them and use that to travel somewhere. So you're building up your miles that way as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, not just overseas, but even there's some things you can do if you want to just stay within the U.S. I'm assuming that most of your listeners live in North America somewhere. Like I bought a hybrid car, and that has saved me so much in gas. It's amazing. And so once you shell out the money for the car, then it's really nice. Like I drove from Salt Lake City to Boulder, Colorado, last week, and I made it all the way there on one tank of gas. So that's like $30, and that's about an 8.5 hour drive. So there's a lot of things like that you can do. And then I'm also a minimalist, and I don't know if you're too familiar with minimalism, but basically living on the stuff that you absolutely need and kind of getting rid of stuff that doesn't add any happiness to your life. And that is one thing that is it's really nice to be able to just pick up and leave. Like I was in San Diego last, and I put everything I owned in my car with the exception of a couple items and just took off. And that's my life. So there's no worries about what am I going to do with my bed? What am I going to do with this cabinet? The things like that.
Let's talk about the entrepreneurial piece. Freedom11.com, you write about this stuff. And you're a perpetual traveler going all around the world, whether it's overseas or within the U.S. You can start businesses online. And at first blush, you'd say, okay, there's lots of freedom in being online. But as we've seen, governments like the U.S. have gotten wise to the act, and now they're starting to shut down people who do business online and starting to exert their power there. You've discovered the toolkit to entrepreneurial anonymity using offshore tactics, using cryptocurrencies, things like that. Walk us through your strategies to achieve anonymity.
Yeah, well, so I don't want to be limited to having to move out of the U.S. if it's turning into a tyrannical place and somewhere I don't want to be. I want to have the option of actually staying here within the U.S. if I want to. So I really gravitate towards setting up my businesses in a way that they're anonymous. And I use a New Mexico LLC for my businesses and also for my bank accounts. So it's something that allows me to, go anonymous, and I can be living in California. I can be living in Vietnam. It doesn't matter. I'm not at a physical location of my business. So that's been a huge strategy. And on my website, there's actually a way to get, if you're interested in getting a New Mexico LLC, you can get 10% off, and it's just on a link on my website, freedom11.com. And then you combine that with you doing something like Bitcoin, which is just exploding and growing. And, every day there's new people accepting Bitcoin and using Bitcoin. And, you've got a pretty anonymous, way to transact. Now, I'm not anyone that's fully 100%, transacting in Bitcoin or anything like that. But storing some funds in Bitcoin I think is a great idea right now, especially with what's going on with the US dollar and all the craziness that the government's doing right now.
No, I think it's so important. People want to stay and fight. They talk to me about this idea of staying and fighting. And you can say it's unpatriotic to not stay, but the reality is we're all born onto a patch of dirt through a genetic lottery. None of us chose where to be born, but we have to choose how to make the most of our own lives. Do we want to stay and be engaged in firefights with people, or do we just want to go somewhere and enjoy ourselves? And I think that's what you talk about, where we talk about the ideas of finding your own freedom. Where is that? And when people say, hey, where's the best place to go? It really depends on you. It's you finding your own freedom, making the most out of making money in the world, finding the place that works for your values.
Exactly. And I said this in a recent blog post. The place, if you're an American, it could possibly be America is where you're finding the most freedom. Like, you may like some things about where you live, or you may have kids here that they want to stay and you want to stay with them. You don't want to travel the world with your kids. So that, you really have to look at it in terms of personal freedom and not so much what the government is doing, because, like I said, it's not something that is in your control. So I always focus on the things that are in my control and what can I do to overcome, what's going on out there. And like you said, stay and fight. Like, I don't envision the idea of fighting as being a life that would be, lead me to happiness and fulfillment. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight anybody. So I'd rather just create the freedom that I can and, exist in that way.
I think some of these guys are looking forward to fighting, and they're looking forward to sitting on their roof and popping things off at people. And I'm not here to tell people to be violent, and I think it's not a way to be happy in life. Isn't that what it all comes down to? Hey, let me get this in here in our final moments. Kevin, FreedomLovin.com. He talks about starting your own businesses around the world. We certainly believe in the idea that you have to diversify not only your assets and not only your own freedom, but also have the freedom to go anywhere that you need to be and still make money. But Kevin, all right, you're a young guy. You're traveling around. You're the perpetual traveler. What do you say to guys who are in your situation? What's the dating? And they say, I don't know, how am I going to date? How am I going to meet people?
That's a great question, Andrew. I like it. It's funny. I kind of went through this a few months back, and I was thinking, I spent a little while in San Diego, and I was thinking that I had to stay there in order to meet someone to date long term. But it's kind of the opposite for me. It's more that I want to travel. I want to be a perpetual traveler. And that doesn't mean I'm moving every other week. I'm more like, several months in one place and then move on to another place after that. But that's part of who I am and what I want to do. And so if I'm not living that, then I'm not going to connect with people that I want to date nearly as well as if I just live my life. And one thing that happens with traveling with me, and I think with a lot of people, is once you set out and start traveling, all kinds of great things happen in your life. And whether it's meeting somebody that you really connect with, or some kind of business deal or something, it seems to always happen when I set out and travel and go places that I'm not familiar with. So I intentionally do that, and I think it's actually a positive if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I think ultimately there are a million excuses not to do something, whether it's traveling the world, whether it's starting your own business, even here or somewhere else. Whatever it is that you're trying to do to bring more freedom into your life, always an excuse to do it, and that's why we love talking to you. Kevin, FreedomLovin.com is the perpetual traveler entrepreneur who is living these things himself. Hey, Kevin, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Andrew, it's great talking to you, and really thanks for your show. I really enjoy your show and your site and what you're doing there, and hope you just keep at it.
Thanks so much. NomadCapitalist.com for your free report. Learn my 7 steps to global economic freedom, includes starting a business. And listen, if you're like Kevin and you say maybe the place for you is your home country, at least find out some of the steps to diversify without leaving your couch. NomadCapitalist.com.